My boyfriend startled me with an unexpected message. I've told everyone we're taking a break. He sent it like it was nothing, like it was an update about groceries or weekend plans, not the kind of sentence that quietly detonates a 4-year relationship. I was sitting alone at the bar of a downtown hotel in Chicago when it happened. And the strangest part is, I didn't panic. I just stared at the screen. Let me explain. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 28 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had my life more or less figured out. I had a solid career in tech consulting. I had an apartment in Manhattan I loved, and for 4 years, I had Daniel Chun. Daniel and I met on a rooftop bar in the city during one of those humid summer nights when the skyline glows and everyone feels slightly more confident than they should. A mutual friend introduced us. Daniel had that easy kind of charm, the kind that made conversations feel effortless. Within 15 minutes, we were talking like we'd known each other for years. Within 6 months, we were talking about the future. Marriage. Kids. Where we might eventually settle down. The whole package. Daniel came from money. Not the flashy, Instagram bragging kind of wealth. The quieter version. The kind where his parents owned a summer house in the Hamptons that looked more like a resort than a vacation home. His family was polished, successful. The kind of people who casually discussed investment portfolios over brunch. At first, it intimidated me, but Daniel always told me none of that mattered to him. He said he loved that I was independent, driven, grounded, and for a long time, I believed him. Looking back now, there were signs. Small ones, little moments where Daniel would casually mention how ambitious his family was, or how his parents admired people who were going places. Sometimes he compared careers the way people compare stock prices. I told myself it was harmless. Love has a funny way of smoothing out warning signs until they look like personality quirks. Or maybe I just didn't want to see them. Because when you've built 4 years of memories with someone, admitting something is wrong feels like admitting you wasted part of your life. So I ignored it. Until that Tuesday night in Chicago. I was attending a 3-day industry conference. Long days of presentations, networking events, and awkward conversations over lukewarm coffee. By the time evening came around, my brain felt fried. So I slipped into the hotel bar, ordered a bourbon, and let myself decompress. The place had low lighting and soft jazz somewhere in the background. Business travelers sat scattered along the bar, half checking emails while pretending to relax. I was halfway through my drink when my phone lit up. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. I smiled automatically. Even after 4 years, that reflex was still there. But when I opened the message, my stomach tightened. Hey, so I've been thinking. That sentence alone felt strange. Daniel usually called when something serious was on his mind. Then the next line appeared. I told my parents and Olivia that we're taking a break, just for a little while. I need some space to figure things out. I read it again. Then a third time. The words didn't change. No warning. No conversation. Just a decision. Delivered through text while I was nearly 800 miles away. The weirdest part was that we'd FaceTimed the night before. Everything had seemed normal. He'd asked how the conference was going. I'd asked about his week. He told me he'd gone to brunch with his sister Olivia. He even said he missed me. Nothing about that conversation hinted that 12 hours later, he'd decide we were suddenly on a break. I stared at the message for a solid 5 minutes. People around me laughed and chatted. Glasses clinked. The bartender polished something with a white towel. But everything felt oddly distant. Finally, I typed back, "Thanks for letting me know." That was it. No questions. No emotional explosion. No begging. I hit send and set the phone down beside my drink. Less than 10 seconds later, the typing bubble appeared. "That's it?" Daniel wrote. "You're not even going to ask why?" I took another sip of bourbon before answering. "You clearly already made your decision." 3 little dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. It happened several times before his next message finally came through. "You're being childish. This is exactly why I need space." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened Facebook. It took less than 30 seconds to change my relationship status. From in a relationship with Daniel Chun to single. I didn't make a dramatic post. No vague quotes. No emotional captions. Just the quiet update. Then I finished my drink, paid the tab, and went upstairs to my hotel room. I slept surprisingly well that night. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of notifications. Apparently, Daniel had spent the night shaping the story before I had even gotten home. He'd told people we were taking a break, that we were going through a rough patch, and that I was having a hard time with it. Friends left sympathetic comments. "Stay strong, man. Relationships are tough." His mother even commented, "Everything will work out." At the time, I still didn't know the full truth. I only knew something inside me had shifted. Instead of confronting Daniel, I focused on the conference. Presentations. Networking. business cards, small talk with strangers whose names I immediately forgot. Then on Friday morning, as I boarded my flight back to New York, I made a decision I'd been avoiding for months. 3 months earlier, a startup in Seattle had offered me a position, project lead, better title, 35% more money. I turned it down because Daniel didn't want to leave New York. His life was here, his family was here, and I told myself relationships required compromise. Now, sitting in seat 14A, somewhere over Ohio, I opened my laptop, pulled up the old email thread, and typed 3 simple words. I accept the offer. They responded within hours. They wanted me to start in 6 weeks. When the plane landed, I turned my phone back on. A message from Daniel appeared almost immediately. Hey, we should talk when you get back. I looked at the screen for a moment. Then I locked my phone and slipped it into my bag. Because something told me the next time Daniel and I saw each other, he was going to be the one surprised. The strange thing about heartbreak is that it doesn't always arrive with screaming or tears. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a door closing in another room. You hear the click, you know something changed, but the rest of the house is still silent. That was how the days after Daniel's message felt. While he was apparently telling everyone we were working through things, I was doing the opposite. I was making plans. By the time I got back to New York that Friday afternoon, my decision about Seattle was already made. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I went home, ordered takeout, and opened my laptop. The official offer letter was still waiting in my inbox. Project lead, Seattle-based startup, stock options, a team reporting to me. It was the kind of opportunity people wait years for. 3 months earlier, I'd hesitated for exactly one reason. Daniel. He had been polite when I told him about the offer, but the reaction was lukewarm. Seattle felt far. His parents were in New York. His career was here. His whole life revolved around the city. Maybe something better will open up here, he'd said. And because I loved him, I convinced myself staying was the mature choice. Now that memory made me laugh, a soft, disbelieving laugh at my own optimism. I signed the acceptance documents that night. The company confirmed everything the next morning. 6 weeks, just long enough to pack up my life. Saturday morning, I started preparing. My lease was month to month, which suddenly felt like a blessing. I boxed up things I rarely used. Books, old coats, holiday decorations I never bothered to put away properly. By early afternoon, I had 3 boxes stacked neatly near the wall. That was when the knock came. 3 sharp raps against the door. I already knew who it was. Daniel had a specific way of knocking. Impatient, confident, like he assumed the door would open immediately. I stood still for a moment. Then I walked over and opened it. Daniel looked surprised. Actually surprised. Like he hadn't been entirely sure I would answer. Hey, he said. He was wearing the same leather jacket he always wore when he wanted to look effortlessly cool. His dark hair was slightly messy, probably from running his hands through it on the way over. Can we talk? Sure, I said. I didn't move. He glanced at the doorway. Can I come in? I stepped aside. Daniel walked into the apartment and immediately stopped. His eyes landed on the boxes. He frowned. What's all this? I'm moving, I said simply. He turned toward me. What? I got a job offer in Seattle. Better opportunity. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then the color drained slightly from his face. When were you going to tell me? I leaned lightly against the wall, folding my arms. Why would I tell you? His eyebrows pulled together. What do you mean, why would you tell me? We're on a break, I said calmly. You're figuring things out, remember? Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I didn't mean... He stopped, clearly struggling to organize his thoughts. This is so typical of you, he finally said. You just shut down instead of communicating. I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it. Daniel, I said, you sent me a text message while I was in another city telling me we were done. His jaw tightened. I said we were taking a break. Okay, I replied. So we're on a break. Yes. That means we're not together. That's not... And if we're not together, I continued calmly, then I don't owe you updates about my life decisions. He stared at me, like I'd suddenly started speaking another language. Then something unexpected happened. His expression softened, and suddenly his eyes filled with tears. Real ones. Not the dramatic kind people force when they want sympathy. The messy, emotional kind that appear when someone realizes they may have made a serious mistake. I messed up, he said quietly. I was confused. I waited. Daniel looked down at the floor. I needed time to think. I tilted my head slightly. About what? He hesitated. Then the word slipped out. Tess. He stopped mid-sentence, but it was already too late. Tess? I repeated slowly. His face froze. That's not... Tessa? I asked. Silence filled the room. Daniel exhaled heavily. It's nothing, he said. Just someone from the gym. We were talking. Nothing happened. I didn't ask if something happened. I didn't need to. Because the moment he said the name, everything sharpened. You brought her up, I said quietly. Daniel rubbed his temples. I just wanted to see if there was something there. And? There isn't, he said quickly. I realized I want to be with you. I studied him for a moment. 4 years of memories stood between us in that silence. Road trips, holidays, late-night conversations about the future. But something fundamental had shifted, and once that shift happens, it's almost impossible to undo. That's nice, I said finally. But I realized something too. Daniel looked up. I don't want to be with someone who keeps me as a backup plan. That's not what I was doing, he insisted. Then what were you doing? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. The answer hung in the air between us. He had wanted to explore another option without losing the safety of the first one. Daniel sat down on the edge of the couch. For a moment, he looked genuinely lost. I love you, he said quietly. I believed him. In his own complicated way, he probably did. But love isn't always the same thing as respect. And respect had quietly disappeared somewhere along the way. I believe you, I said softly. But loving someone doesn't mean you get to treat them like a backup plan. Daniel stayed for another 20 minutes. The conversation went in circles. He said he'd made a mistake, that we could fix things, that he didn't want to lose what we had. But every sentence sounded like something a person says only after consequences become real. Eventually, he stood up. His shoulders looked heavier than when he'd arrived. So that's it? He asked. I nodded. I think it is. Daniel lingered near the door like he wanted to say something else. Then he left. The apartment fell quiet again. For a long moment, I stood there staring at the closed door. Then I went back to packing. 2 weeks later, I got a text from someone I hadn't expected to hear from. Daniel's younger sister, Olivia. We had always gotten along well. Better than Daniel and Olivia did, actually. Her message was simple. Hey, Emily, I know things are complicated right now, but I wanted you to know you're still welcome at my wedding if you want to come. I read it twice. The wedding was in early November. Originally, I'd been invited as Daniel's +1. Now the situation felt awkward. I typed back. I appreciate it, Olivia, but I don't think that's appropriate given everything. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then her reply came. For what it's worth, Daniel's bringing Tessa. I stared at the message. Something inside me went very still. Not heartbreak, not anger, just confirmation. The break had never really been about space. It had been about testing my replacement. And in that moment, a quiet, slightly petty voice in my head whispered something unexpected. Maybe I should go to the wedding after all. For about 10 minutes after Olivia's message, I just sat there staring at my phone. Daniel was bringing Tessa to the wedding. Not a friend, not a casual date. Bringing her. The word carried weight. It meant Tessa had already been introduced to the family. It meant Daniel was comfortable enough with the situation to walk into a room full of relatives and stand beside someone new. And suddenly, everything Daniel had said in my apartment 2 weeks earlier replayed in my mind. I realize I want to be with you. The words now felt hollow, because people who truly realize something important don't immediately show up somewhere else with someone new. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and leaned back against the cabinets. The apartment looked less like a home and more like a waiting room now. Boxes near the wall, open shelves, a life halfway packed. 6 weeks until Seattle. Actually 5 now. I should have let Olivia's message go. Ignored it. Wished her well from the distance and moved on with my life. But something about her text stuck with me. She hadn't invited me out of politeness. Olivia and I had built our own relationship over the years. We'd gone to brunch without Daniel. We'd texted about work stress. She had once helped me plan a surprise birthday party for him. She had always treated me like family, and now she was getting married. That mattered. So I picked my phone back up. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Then I typed, Actually, I'd love to come. Olivia replied almost immediately. Really? Yes, I wrote. Her next message arrived seconds later. Excited, relieved, and filled with far too many exclamation points. I'm so happy you're coming, she said. I'll make sure you have a good seat. You don't need to worry about anything awkward. I smiled slightly at that. The awkwardness wasn't something anyone could arrange seating around. But Olivia meant well. I didn't mention Seattle. I didn't mention the job. I didn't mention that in 5 weeks I would be living nearly 3,000 miles away. I simply confirmed my attendance. For the first time since Daniel's message in Chicago, I felt something close to anticipation. Not revenge, just curiosity. The following week, I flew to Seattle. The company covered the trip so I could find an apartment before my start date. The city greeted me with gray skies and a soft drizzle people always talk about. But it had energy. Coffee shops on every corner. People moving quickly like they had somewhere interesting to be. Mountains faintly visible in the distance when the clouds shifted. By the second day, I knew I wanted to live there. I toured 4 apartments. The 4th one was the winner. Capitol Hill. Large windows, hardwood floors, enough space for the kind of life I was starting to imagine. I signed the lease that afternoon. Walking back onto the street afterward felt strangely freeing. For the first time in months, my future didn't feel like a negotiation with someone else's expectations. It felt like mine. That night, I took a photo in front of the Space Needle. Just a simple tourist moment. Wind tugging lightly at my hair. City lights glowing behind me. The next morning, before flying back to New York, I updated my Facebook profile. New city, Seattle. New employer. New profile photo. I paused briefly at the relationship status. Still single. Then I closed the app. The week before Olivia's wedding passed quickly. Packing. Finishing projects at work. Quiet dinners alone. Daniel didn't contact me again. Not once. Which oddly enough made everything easier. By the time the wedding weekend arrived, my apartment looked almost empty. Just a suitcase by the door and a few pieces of furniture waiting to be sold. It felt like the final stretch before a new chapter. The wedding venue was in Westchester, one of those upscale estates that looked like it belonged in a movie about old money and family traditions. Circular driveway, valet parking, perfectly trimmed gardens. I checked into a nearby hotel that afternoon. Standing in front of the mirror later, adjusting the sleeves of my dress, I studied my reflection. I looked calm, not angry, not nervous, just steady. Maybe that was the real difference between the woman I had been 6 weeks earlier and the one standing there now. The reception had already begun when I arrived. Soft music drifted across the lawn. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying trays of champagne. Guests in formal clothes gathered in small circles. The moment Olivia saw me, her face lit up. "Emily!" She hurried across the lawn and wrapped me in a hug. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "It means a lot." "I wouldn't miss it," I said. "You look beautiful." She did. Radiant in that way people sometimes are when they're stepping into a new life. She introduced me to her husband, who seemed like a genuinely good guy. When he heard I was moving to Seattle, his eyes lit up. "No way," he said. "I went to college there. That city is amazing." For a few minutes, everything felt completely normal. Then I saw Daniel. He was standing near the bar. Next to him was a tall woman in a sleek black dress. Tessa. Even from a distance, it was obvious. Daniel was laughing at something she said. For a moment, it felt like watching a scene from someone else's life. Detached. Almost unreal. Then Daniel looked up. Our eyes met across the reception lawn. The smile vanished from his face instantly. He froze. I lifted my champagne glass slightly. A polite acknowledgement. Nothing dramatic. Just recognition. Daniel said something quickly to Tessa. Then he started walking toward me. "What are you doing here?" he asked when he reached me. "Olivia invited me." "You didn't tell me you were coming." I tilted my head slightly. "Why would I?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "We're not together," I added calmly. "Remember?" His frustration flashed immediately. "This is inappropriate." "Is it?" I asked. "Olivia seemed pretty happy to see me. And your parents said hello earlier. The only person who looks uncomfortable right now is you." Before he could respond, Tessa approached us. She must have noticed the tension. Daniel forced a quick smile. "Emily," he said stiffly, "this is Tessa." Tessa extended her hand. "Nice to meet you." We shook hands. Her grip was confident, polite. And it became immediately obvious she had no idea who I was, which told me something important. Daniel had rewritten the story before introducing her to anyone. To Tessa, I was just another guest at the wedding. "Do you two know each other?" she asked casually. Daniel answered too quickly. "Emily and Olivia worked together on a charity event a few years ago." I didn't correct him, not because I wanted to protect Daniel, but because this wasn't the moment. "Olivia and I got to know each other pretty well," I said with a polite smile. Tessa nodded, satisfied enough. "Well, nice meeting you." She excused herself to grab another drink. The moment she walked away, Daniel's expression hardened. "You didn't have to come. I didn't have to stay away either. This is Olivia's wedding. You're doing this on purpose." "Doing what exactly?" "Showing up like this." "Like what?" He opened his mouth but couldn't finish the sentence. Like someone who had moved on. Like someone who wasn't devastated. Before he could try again, someone called his name from across the lawn. One of his cousins. Daniel exhaled sharply. "We're not done talking about this." "We actually are," I said quietly. He stared at me for another second before turning and walking away. Dinner was announced shortly afterward. My place card led me to a table near the back with several of Olivia's college friends, which turned out to be a blessing. They were funny, relaxed, and blissfully unaware of the quiet tension across the room. Within minutes, we were talking about travel, careers, and the chaos of adulthood. Someone eventually asked what I did. "I work in tech consulting," I said, "but I'm moving to Seattle in a few weeks." That sparked immediate excitement. 2 people at the table had lived there before. One recommended a ramen place. Another insisted I had to try a bakery near Pike Place Market. For the first time in weeks, I found myself laughing easily. Across the room, I noticed Daniel watching our table more than once. Later that evening, someone approached my table. Emily. I looked up. Daniel's mother stood beside me. Patricia Chun had always been impeccably put together. Tonight was no exception. Her silver dress was elegant and understated. I was hoping I'd get a chance to say hello, she said warmly. I stood. Of course. She gave me a quick hug. How have you been? Good, I said honestly. Busy with work. I saw on Facebook that you're moving to Seattle, she said. That's quite a change. It is, I admitted. But I'm excited about it. She nodded thoughtfully. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten slightly. Daniel mentioned that you two were working things out. For a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard correctly. Working things out? I repeated. Yes, Patricia said. He told us you had a long conversation recently and were figuring out how to move forward. My mind went blank. Because the last conversation Daniel and I had was the one in my apartment. And that conversation ended with him walking out the door. We hadn't spoken since. Patricia studied my face carefully. She was an observant woman. That's not true, is it? She asked quietly. I hesitated. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I understood what answering honestly would do. It would expose Daniel's lie at his sister's wedding. But I hadn't created the lie, so I took a breath. No, ma'am, I said gently. We haven't spoken in over 3 weeks. And I've been single since the day he texted me saying we were taking a break. Patricia didn't react immediately. Her expression shifted slowly. First confusion, then disappointment. I see, she said softly. I'm sorry you were put in that position. It's okay, I replied. She squeezed my hand briefly. I hope Seattle treats you well, Emily. You deserve to be happy. Then she turned and walked away, straight toward Daniel. I couldn't hear what she said to him. But I didn't need to. Daniel's face went pale within seconds. His eyes shot across the room. They landed on me, and the expression in them had completely changed. Not embarrassment, anger. He crossed the room quickly. What did you say to my mother? He demanded. The truth. You had no right to do that. I didn't lie to her, Daniel. That's not the point. Then what is the point? His jaw clenched. You humiliated me. I almost laughed. Daniel, I said quietly, I didn't humiliate you. Your lie just didn't survive the evening. Across the room, Tessa was watching us now, confused, trying to piece together what was happening. Daniel noticed too. For the first time that night, he looked uncertain. Can we talk somewhere else? He muttered. We already did, I said calmly. That conversation ended weeks ago. He stared at me for another moment before walking away. I watched him return to the bar where Tessa stood waiting. She immediately asked something. Daniel answered quickly. Too quickly. Tessa frowned. She looked toward me again, then back at Daniel. Whatever he said next clearly didn't land well. She asked another question. Daniel hesitated, and that hesitation told her everything. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Then Tessa stepped back. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't make a scene. She simply said something short, nodded once, and walked away toward the garden exit. Daniel stood there alone. For the first time that evening, he looked genuinely shaken. Later that night, after the reception ended, my phone started buzzing while I was in the hotel elevator. Daniel. I let it ring. Then it rang again. By the time I reached my room, there were 3 missed calls. And a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. Instead, I changed into comfortable clothes and ordered room service. Another call came while I was waiting for the food. Then another. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I listened to the voicemail. Daniel sounded furious. You didn't have to do that tonight. You made me look like an idiot. You could have stayed out of it. 10 minutes later, another voicemail arrived. This one sounded different. Less angry. More desperate. Emily, please call me. We need to talk. Just before midnight, a third voicemail came. His voice sounded tired. I guess this is really over. The next morning, I sent one text. Just one. I didn't humiliate you. Your lies caught up with you. Please don't contact me again. He ignored the last part. Messages continued for 2 weeks. First defensive, then apologetic, eventually regretful. Tessa ended things. She said the situation was too messy. I wish I could fix this. I never responded. 6 weeks after the wedding, I was sitting in my new apartment in Seattle, watching rain slide down the tall windows. The city outside glowed softly under the streetlights. Inside, the space felt calm, new, uncomplicated. My job had started 2 weeks earlier, and it was already everything I'd hoped for. The projects were challenging. The team was smart. For the first time in a long time, my work felt like it was moving my life forward. Daniel's messages eventually stopped, not because I replied, but because there was nothing left for him to say. A few weeks later, Olivia sent me a message. For what it's worth, I always thought you were too good for him. I smiled when I read that. Then I put my phone down and looked out at the rain. Sometimes people ask if I regret going to that wedding. If it was petty, maybe a little. But something important happened there. For 4 years, Daniel had been a central part of my life. Standing in that reception hall, watching everything unravel, I realized something that hadn't fully clicked before. Daniel hadn't taken anything from me. He had simply revealed who he really was. And he did it before marriage, before shared finances, before children, which meant I walked away with something far more valuable than revenge: freedom. These days, when rain taps softly against my windows in Seattle, I sometimes think about how differently my life might look if Daniel had never sent that text. If we had stayed together, if I had kept turning down opportunities to keep his life comfortable. But then I look around my apartment, at the city outside, at the future unfolding in front of me, and I realize something simple. Sometimes the trash takes itself out, and when it does, you suddenly have a lot more space in your life for something better.